Sam is the Assistant Vice President for Stanford University IT Shared Services. So Sam is local. He's a member of the Office of the CIO, been at Stanford since 1999. From 2006 to 2015, he was the Executive Director for Business Services in Stanford's IT Services Organization. Earlier in his career, for better for worse, he was at KPMG as a consultant in a past life.
So were you?
Yeah.
Must have been for better.
Yeah, something like that. Sam holds a
Look
BA.
how far it got us.
Yes. Sam holds a BA in philosophy from Stanford and an MBA from UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. So please welcome Sam Steinhardt.
Thank you.
Okay. So Sam, first of all, I understand you and I chatted last week and we had a good conversation about what's going on at Stanford for University IT Shared Services. But rather than me say it, can you give us a little bit of background on what it is? What is Stanford University IT Shared Services? How long has it been in place and what's the scope? So give us a bit of a background on that.
So it's been in place formally only about 9 months. I would say it was in formation for about a year prior to that. So what it is we have a central IT organization. And that central IT organization is composed of 3 units. To anonymize it, we'll just call them A, B, and C. 3 units, each of which is responsible for a set of services that are delivered out to the entire Stanford campus. To put that in context, our central IT is composed of about 1/3 of all of the IT resources at Stanford. So Stanford has 7 schools and a host of distributed administrative units. I like to think of them as 25 budget units. So that's how we talk about them at Stanford. So it's 25 distributed units, and then there's central IT. So we've brought together those three units in IT, which are the services delivery groups, and as we did that, we created a shared services group, which I'm responsible for. That shared services is composed initially of 5 functions. IT service management, which many of you may be aware of. If not, I could talk a little bit about what that is. That's really the core of what we're trying to do with IT across the university. Then there's finance, vendor management, communications, and a group we call our business partners, which are the people who do outreach to those 25 distributed units. So that's kind of the lay of the land.
So what were the drivers, Sam, for setting it up? I mean, why?
The drivers were to unlock.
Okay.
Wait, where is it?
Unlock
operational efficiencies. That was one of the drivers.
Yeah.
And I laugh a little bit, honestly, at that phrase. I like the phrase, but we should all just be honest. That's my stock in trade. Our research universities weren't built to be efficient. They were built for a whole bunch of other reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the efficiencies. And this idea of trying to create efficiencies is so countercultural and so just so against the grain of what most people think we're trying to accomplish in these amazing enterprises, that those of us who talk about efficiencies sometimes we're like speaking a foreign language.
Right.
And so the idea of unlocking is kind of it's a good phrase, but it's very hard. Now I forgot what you asked me.
Well, but were there any other drivers apart from
the driver?
efficiencies?
Yeah. So we do client satisfaction surveys, so surveys of all of our stakeholders. And one of the things that we've consistently found is that our service, as it is delivered from these 3 groups, A, B, and C, is inconsistent. It's inconsistent in almost every respect. So across those 3 units, we deliver. We like to say we deliver 250 services. The truth is that maybe 2/3 of those are kind of inside baseball services we're delivering to each other in order to get the services out to the end users. But we do deliver maybe 50 or maybe 80 different services to the entire Stanford community. And those range from things like network to data center services to desktop support, email, calendar, the list goes on and on. And one thing we've consistently heard is how inconsistent we are across that spectrum. So some of those services, the clients of those services find them very responsive. When there's an incident, they hear about it immediately. It gets handled immediately. It gets resolved. If there's a root cause, they find out about it, they fix it, and it never happens again. At the other end of the spectrum, they might have an incident, and it might be a week before they've heard a thing from anybody. Maybe it got fixed, maybe it didn't, and everything in between. So call that customer service, right? That's the that more than the idea of efficiencies. That's what our clients are looking for, and that's what that was really more the primary driver than finding efficiencies. My view, and I go back a little ways. I spent a lot of time in the 90s working in quality, the whole quality improvement thing, Deming cycle and all that. And I became convinced, and I'm still convinced, that the best service is delivered when you're most efficient. That those two things actually go together. Right. That when you're inefficient, that's what your clients, when your clients experience bad service, they're actually experiencing your inefficiencies. And that's kind of the beginning of the story for me. They do go hand in hand, efficiencies with great service. Very easy to say here in front of a group in this beautiful setting, but not so easy to do.
Yeah, so we're actually going to come back to that in our session later on, what you just said. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, and you and I talked about this on the phone the other day, is this thing called shared services.
Right.
Let me ask you, how do you define shared services yourself, and then how's it been translated within the University of Stanford?
Okay, so when we started this team, I talked with the people actually doing the work about what shared services means, what I think it means. And the way I do it is by breaking down the two words. So we've got shared and we've got service. So shared to me has two aspects. One is these three groups, A, B, and C, actually share in our success. So we can't be successful without them, and they can't be successful without us. So there needs to be a real sharing of everything, starting with foundational principles, actually, why we're here, what we're trying to accomplish, and that we're all kind of in it together. The other piece of shared that I think is probably transferable to most shared services organizations, but in some cases maybe not, is that I mentioned the five units that live within shared services. And those five have to share also, right? So, for example, if our vendor management team is working with A, B, or C on some kind of new agreement, they need to share that information with the communications team, with the finance team, with the service management team. And if they don't, it's very hard it's impossible for each of those units to be their best. So for me, again, the sharing has to be inside as well as across. So that's the shared. The other component is the service component, and service for me is about being clear about what it is you want to deliver, making clear commitments, and then keeping those commitments. Not over-promising, not under-promising, although I am an advocate of under-promising and over-delivering, but sometimes that gets you in trouble if your under-promise sounds to the people you're serving like it's really not going to be enough. So you have to get that foundation of what it is you're going to be able to achieve and then deliver against it. That's service. In our resource-constrained environments, which we all have, that's a conversation, right? There's a conversation about what it is you need, what the ideal looks like, and then what's possible. And then what it is that, so let's say I'm talking to A, what do they need? Is that the same as what B needs? Is that the same as what C needs? Where are the commonalities? And then we start to develop what our services are and get to agreed upon expectations, and then try to deliver against those commitments.
Actually, that leads me to another question. So how are you structured? You have, I understand, again, you have about 50, mixture of 50 staff, a mixture of full-time staff and contractors, correct? That's
yes.
Right. So how is your team structured? Is it structured along customer lines, in other words, customer groupings, or is it structured along service lines? Like, clearly it's partly on service lines by the 5, but within that, how are you structured from that perspective?
So that's a great question. We are structured currently by just by those functional groups.
Right.
But we spend a lot of time in what I would call matrix conversations. So I don't feel like we're big enough at this point to be structured across client lines. Although I would say so within some of my groups, there are specific people dedicated to delivering service only to specific clients.
Right.
So like an easy one to talk about is finance. So if we have 10 people in finance, maybe 3 of them are singularly focused on supporting A. And then another 3 are focused on B, and another 3, well, not quite 3, but on C. So, but it's very important for our finance leader to be creating consistency across what's going on in A, B, and C.
Right.
That's where there's efficiency.
Right.
So we created that group because we started with each of those A, B, and C having their own finance group, right? And so I don't want to just mimic.
Replicate it.
I don't want to replicate what they had. That's not. You're not going to unlock any efficiencies that way. So you have to do a little bit of both.
Right. Question that I get asked all the time, and I got actually asked this morning before we even started, how are you funded? Because setting up
it just
shared
falls
service,
from the sky.
Yeah.
That's how the academic folks thinks it works. It comes from the sky. No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, that's the question, basically. How are you funding? There's a follow-up to that. So let's answer that question about where does the money come from the sky? Where's that coming from?
We took money that was funding all of these various functions within these units, and we moved it over here. And the units, it's really a hybrid model. So we deliver about $150 million worth of services to the campus community from that central IT. And that is about split pretty close to half in terms of what is charged out and what is what we call generally funded. So it's money we get from the center, let's say. And our funding really mirrors that.
Right.
So when we moved those functions over, we moved the funding with it, and so it's complicated. It's way more complicated right now than we would like, and that's one of the inefficiencies that we are hoping to fix. I mean, some of these funding models are very arcane.
Yeah.
They're in our case, and I'm not exaggerating. They come from delivery models that were invented in the 80s and have been passed down through the generations. I mean, the 80s isn't that long, ago, but but when you talk about technology, it's kind of that long ago. I mean, I did my honors thesis on a typewriter, so that's just me. But you know, it's you know, so technology has gone from typewriter in the 80s to every kind of automated device we could possibly have, and yet our funding models are still rooted like, you know, like old redwood trees. They're rooted in these things. So if we, and there's some inefficiencies in those funding models. They create all kinds of weird and strange behaviors.
A bit of smoke and mirrors, don't you think, as well? I mean, one of the things we find when we ask the question, not just in higher ed, by the way, it happens in government and it happens in the private sector too, is you ask the question, how much does that cost? You know, how much does it cost to provide a service, be it, you know, finance services or in IT or service management or help desk or accounts payable or payroll or whatever it is. You ask the question, how much does that cost? And you get an answer that, I don't know, so-and-so knows. And you go and talk to them and they say, no, I don't really know, because it's a mixture of budget allocation and absorption and funding and burden rates. And you go, okay. So you go looking for it. Have you, how, where are you on that track of trying to understand the cost of service?
So, as I said, half of our portfolio is charged out, half of our portfolio is generally funded. So the blessing that is associated with the charged out, this is going to sound funny, but is that it's kind of regulated. So because we're an R1, we have to, our R1 research institution, right. Our costing methodologies are subject to government compliance rules. I see some head nodding out there, so folks are familiar with that concept. And so the blessing of that is that on those services, we have had to, for years, fully allocate costs. We've had to evolve our methodologies. We've had to refine how we do it. So if you ask me, what is it, you know, where do we come up with the cost of what it costs us to support a desktop or to support one person's desktop per month? We can tell you pretty close to exactly what that number is. If you ask me on the other side of the world, what does it cost to run our email system? Then I go to where you went, which is, well, we don't, because because it's not because we in the financial world don't want to do it or figure it out according to the same kind of, you know, pretty rigorous cost allocation methodology. The people running those systems have never had to do it. They like not having had to do it. They like the fact that they run all of these systems for all of this money. They can move money if they need to. They don't want maybe, you know, maybe they're running it one thing at a very low cost and people feel like, well, that's why it sucks. Can I use that word?
And
then on the other hand, maybe they're spending a lot of money on something else because you know, they're trying to meet some other set of needs, and they don't. I mean, it's not all. What's the opposite of positive intent? I like to think about positive intent. I can't even think what the opposite is, but whatever the opposite would be, it's not that. It's just they've never had to do it, and why bother me with that?
Yeah, I mean,
what difference does it make?
I'm going somewhere with that. Well, one thing we get in higher ed, and we're going to touch this as well, is that you get it in the private sector too, so I'm going to come back to that, but it's the way it was always done around here. So that actually links to what are some of the challenges that you've faced? I mean, it's early days for you in IT shared service. It was June 2015, right? You moved into the role, so it's still early days. What are some of the challenges you already started to face, and how are you attempting to address and addressing those?
So, so from the inside, by far the biggest challenge is this sharing this idea of sharing from the inside. Most of us have been rewarded for doing a good job in our domain. And the idea of sharing being a value that we are going to reward, and actually if you share and then someone shares with you that's going to make you more effective in your domain, that is a tough concept for a lot of people. So we're working on that, and we have a lot of different approaches. We have communal websites, we have bi-weekly all-hands meetings, we have social events, we have Sam carrying a stick once in a while when it's just so obvious to me that people haven't shared, and it's like I am the one who's just gets slapped in the face with, you knew that, but you did that because you didn't know that, and why didn't you tell? Like, we just met, the six of us. Why didn't that get shared? So there's that. That's the biggest challenge on the inside. I think the biggest challenge with A, B, and C is that they were huge supporters of this. It wouldn't have happened unless they supported it. It was as much, it's not like this idea was imposed on them. We all came to this idea together, and yet when it comes to things like, well, wouldn't it be more efficient if, then they have their laundry list of reasons why they really do. It's really critical that they what I call optimize locally, and overcoming that is difficult.
Yeah,
it's difficult. We don't use sticks in higher ed usually. We try to use carrots when we can, and yet sometimes a little stick isn't a bad.
Yeah.
Is it, but and a lot of times the goodwill or the positive intent that led to the creation, well, this is going to sound hard to believe, but maybe the leader of A was thinking, well, gee, this is going to benefit me, and so I like this idea because I'm going to be able to make the things that I'm doing cut across everything. And then maybe the leader of B was thinking exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And maybe C was thinking, I don't know, maybe the same thing too. And so now they all agreed this is great, but and then maybe the whole buy-in for that didn't filter down into their organizations quite as much as you would have liked. So you get a lot of differing views.
Yeah.
And again, in higher ed, there's not a lot of you must do it this way. I mean, the word we use is mandate, and it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I'll come back to that a bit later, but this mandating in higher ed, the danger with mandating in higher ed is you do it inappropriately. So what I mean by that is you collaborate. We'll talk about that later. And then you suddenly go, oops, we need to do something. And somebody on high goes, do it. And there's an expression we've used from working with some of the universities, and Chaz will know this, it's what I call design, build, shove it in, which is we're going to talk about it, we're going to design it, we're going to build it, oops, we need to do it, run out of money, time, the president wants to know, do it, go live. That's a disaster. And there's a word, you actually used that word earlier on about some of this, it can be a disaster. So we could talk all day about change management, collaboration, etc. Before we do that, if there are any questions, there's about 15 minutes of this session to go, so if anybody has any questions as we go through, I'm going to keep asking, but if you have questions, please raise your hand. There is a microphone, right, wandering around somewhere. Please raise your hand and we'll take a question as we go through. Okay, so just so you know. I want to make sure Sam gets the opportunity to answer those questions. Just talking about the setup and what's in it for me and A, B, and C, Sam, that you just described. When you embarked on this as a university and within your system, was there a business case for this, or was it narrative? So in other words, what measures, metrics and baseline is there to measure your success? How do you intend to measure success going forward? Ultimately, what are you measuring against?
So the answer to your first question was narrative, not business case. There is an expectation that we will save some money. Honestly, that we will save some money, that we will unlock some efficiencies and save some money. Although there's not like a dollar target. I think because I have been because I've been in this world at Stanford for quite a while, I think Randy Livingston, our CFO, who created this, kind of knows that I'm gonna do that. He didn't say, you need to save 10% or 20% by this date or else. But I think he knows that I see the opportunities and I'm going to take advantage of them. The metrics.
So can I just jump in there? Are you saying, therefore, you're going to build the baseline as you go along in a way? It wasn't one when you started, but you're starting to gather that information to assess that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, but, I mean, I know what it's costing us now to deliver the services, and I have my own targets, and my target is 10% a year.
Okay.
Honestly, I've done that in previous roles, and for the first few years, 10% is actually kind of easy. It really is. It's and some of that has to be me just saying, oh, that person left. Let's figure out how we can consolidate these few things or maybe do them a different way. I know you can get that done. So we're going to just hold that job. You still have it. You still have that billet, we call it, but we're not going to fill it for 6 months. We're going to see how we do without it, and you see if you can come up with some new ways of doing things. You're going to go, I'm talking to a director level person. You can go, let's see what you can do. Right. Because a lot of our cost is staffing, and I don't want to get into kind of a staff reduction, but I can tell the places. The other thing we're doing is a lot of automation on the service management side, and that is going to save us a pretty healthy amount of money, but over the course of a 3 to 5 year implementation. Money's not the only metric. The other metric really is client satisfaction, and we do surveys every year, and we react to those findings, and we try to identify at the specific service level what we can do and part of our job in the shared services, in this service management function, is to consult, guide, not yet mandate, but help our service managers at the service level figure out how they can do things better. We're supposed to be bringing expertise to that, and that should improve our client satisfaction scores. And if it doesn't, and a lot of our services, by the way, our client satisfaction is already pretty good. I tend to want to always raise the bar, and so I tend to say, well, that's great. Now let's look at this other stuff down here where we can do better, and what do we need to do better? Yeah. But those, the money and the client satisfaction are really the core.
Back to the drivers again. You're going to measure them. There's a question. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Peggy Houston. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Campus Shared Services here at Berkeley. Welcome, Sam. Thanks for coming.
Brian says hello.
Oh, well, thanks.
And I looked at the list, but you weren't on it.
I don't know why I did register, but...
it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'd like to talk with you even more offline, too. Yeah. So my question is about, you talked earlier about identifying needs, and so that brought a question to mind of how do you determine needs versus wants, which gets to a larger question for me around governance, for lack of a better word, and just wondering, how you are working with the campus to determine what what you will be providing to the campus and to meet the need, and who really is the client? Is it the campus, a unit, an individual?
Great questions. You want to take those?
Wow.
Seconds or less, right?
So let's see, the things I heard you ask, which was a lot, was needs versus wants, and who are your clients?
Yep.
That's the two. So, wow. The needs versus wants is very hard. It's work. It's work. In our environments, there's no substitute for building relationships and having honest conversations built on those relationships. It's the only way I know of to be successful in any administrative endeavor on our campuses. It's the only way for the things that I've done that I can call successes, that's the only way they've happened. And I can't even say I've done them because it really does take a village of people. Even on the needs thing, so we're having a debate amongst what we call our CIO council. So this gets a little bit to who your clients are, and so we have this group called the CIO Council, which is the lead technology person in each of the budget units that I mentioned earlier. And I say lead because some of them are called CIO, some of them are called Director of Technology. There's a whole host of different titles. But they're the ones that are pretty much seen as the head technology person in each of these organizations. And we meet monthly, and we talk about, we've been doing this for quite some time, and it's kind of evolved over time. And what we have found is that the better we get our act together, the more it forces them to get their acts together. And when the only way to talk about needs versus wants is at the specific service. What service is it we're talking about? So we right now at Stanford, we have, I'm going to call it 5 different document storage and management solutions. There's actually more than that, I'm sure, locally, but 5 that you all would have all heard of. And we currently formally support, well, it's hard for me to even say because let's say we support 3 of them. And we would really, over time, like to pare that down. So we go out and we talk to clients, end users, people using these things, and then we brought that back to the CIO Council. And of course, the first thing they said was you didn't talk to the right people. Because how could you have come to that? You didn't talk to my one researcher who loves fill in the blank. So, what do we do about that? Over time, our hope is we're going to lead them to the 2 solutions that meet 80% of the wants, and that's going to be the need. And what I talked about in that meeting was resource constraints. It's like, it would be great if we could support all 5 of these things, soup to nuts, and you guys would love them. But we can't. So, look, friends, we don't have the resources. Do you have the resources? Are you gonna pay us to support all these? And then, of course, they're like, well, we don't have the resources. So, I guess those come in combination. And for us, while we go out and talk to end users, we really bring it back to that CIO council, and think of them as we think of them as the decision makers associated with all of those stakeholders, and that their combined wisdom, which is both what do people want and what can we actually accomplish for them, that's how we get to those answers. it's work. It's really work. It's hard work. And it can be sometimes very exhausting.
One thing, I asked Sam a question like this the other day, and one thing he said to me is the customer doesn't actually know what they need in a lot of circumstances. And that's very true of IT for sure, but not just, if you talk about HR, it's the same sort of thing. I mean, you ask someone what HR really does as a service, often the customer doesn't actually know what strategic HR means, for example. So part of it is actually helping educate the customer on what they need. And the wants versus needs is a huge topic. But anyway, did you have a follow-up, Peggy?
No, I was just going to say, it sounds a lot like what the work that we're doing here on the campus. I was hoping you had figured out a much easier, faster way. But thank you for your response.
Yeah.
It was an honest response.
The needs versus wants, somebody in this last meeting we had about these document solutions said, so there, on the one hand, there's the guy who says, well, you didn't talk to this research group. Then on the other hand, there's the thing where somebody brought up, Henry Ford apparently said, if I had asked the customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Yeah. So what customers were asked before Apple invented the iPhone, right? I don't think any. I think they invented something and we all ended up being unable to live without it. But it's not because we said this is what we need. Invent us a little device that'll do all these things for us that we haven't even imagined are possible. So it's not, we're not talking about that level, but we are talking about, let's be realistic about what you really need.
Any other question at the back? Just take the mic, yeah.
Yes, I'm Janet Spear. I work for Peggy, and I'm actually in the HR space.
My condolences.
So, no, actually, it's awesome, but I'm in the HR space, and you're right, people don't know what we do. I have actually two questions. You had mentioned early on that, one of the important things was to get everybody together and kind of agree on what your services were, and how we were going to work on that. And my question is, what happens when you didn't agree? Or did everybody come to consensus and yay, you now have clarity around that? Because I think that when we try to put together information, frequently we get to the point where people just don't agree. Yeah. And then what do you do? And then my second question is you mentioned that you're looking to get some savings and efficiencies in the organization by investing in technology. And I'm wondering, what is your actual spend in your technology investment on an annual basis? So what is the organization actually investing in the shared service from a technology perspective on an annual basis?
Not sure. Well, not sure exactly how to answer the second one, but and now I can't remember.
The first question was more about if people don't agree on.
Oh, if people don't. Yeah. People never agree. I mean, I mean what? Okay, that's a little bit of an overstatement. Obviously, we can agree that we all like Peet's coffee, right? Yes. Wait, any Starbucks people in the? See, we don't agree. I like Peet's. I was thrilled to see Peet's coffee there. Honestly, that CIO council that I talked about is about, I think it's maybe 20 people. The chances that everyone will agree on any specific thing are the more important is the less the chances that they will all agree. They represent and have to serve incredibly varied constituencies. We have students, we have faculty, we have hard sciences, we have humanities, we have engineering, we have business, we have law, we have medicine, we have 2 hospitals, we have SLAC, the Linear Accelerator Center. Each one of these places has, if you go down beneath the surface, sure, they all need email, right? They all need a collaboration system. Can they agree on even their basic needs? I mean, there can be some very basic agreement, but they have preferences. Who agrees on their preferences? Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't. If we can get most of them to nod and say, okay, let's move forward in that direction, I think we've done great. If we're 50-50, we got a problem. If we're at 60-40, that's not fabulous. So if we can get to maybe 80-20, very thrilled, very happy. And maybe the next time the 20 are on the 80 side for the next conversation, and maybe over time, everybody gets to be more often on the 80 side than they are on the 20 side, because that's just how it works out over periods of time. Honestly, I think that's the best we can do. We spent 3 years trying to decide which cloud email and calendar solution we were going to implement. It was ridiculous. It was completely ridiculous. We now are using Microsoft Office 365. I remind the people who were so adamant about Google that the world has not come to an end. They're getting their email. They can use the same client they used to use. Only a few occasionally drop off the table. I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm joking. No, but honestly, that actually helps. Things like that actually help when you're making a decision, to remind them of what we've gone through in the past, trying to get to an absolute agreement, and how we didn't get there, and it actually didn't matter. It's okay. Everything's okay. The second part, I think you asked about what our shared services is costing us.
From an IT technology perspective. Yeah.
So obviously you're investing in shared services by enabling your technology. How much are you actually investing in your technology to enable that?
So the big thing we're investing in is ServiceNow. ServiceNow is our is our bright shiny object. Sorry, because I say that because anytime there's this brand new, really incredible technology, people do put, there are at least a group of people who put an incredible weight on how, if we do this right and if we do it perfectly, things will be so different we won't even recognize ourselves. And I'm a big proponent of implementing ServiceNow and doing it well and doing it right, but I think there's a lot of other things we're going to need to do along the way to get to have it be an implementation that serves us the way these people dream of it serving us. And it's not going to be, even after we do all that, it's not going to live up to every hope and dream and expectation, but things will be better, and it will be part of the path of continuous improvement. Everybody knows what ServiceNow costs, so I don't need to tell you what we're spending on it.
All right, Sam, with that, actually, we're out of time, but are you hanging around for a little bit till lunch?
Yeah.
So if anyone has any follow-up questions with Sam, please find him and have those questions and exchange business cards.
Isn't it when I get to ask them all the questions?
You can do that. You can do that a little bit later.
That's
all
what
right.
I'm going to do.
Thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Thank you.